All right, and we are recording. Hello, everyone. My name is Darnell Sai. Today we'll be talking about MSPE. I am currently the coordinator for the OCRA Office of Career Residency Advising, as well as stepping in as the interim role for the Residency and Career Advisor. Okay. And on this page, we'll be showing you our staff. And if you want to quick say hi, a quick hello, Dr. Wynn.
Thank you, Darnell, and hi, everybody. You know who I am. I'm Dr. Nguyen. I'm the Associate Dean for Career Advising, and Darnell and I are so excited to work with you over these next few months to support you throughout this residency application process. Thank you, Darnell.
Thank you, Dr. Wynn. All right, everyone. First thing first, we are getting into business. So this is the MSPE timeline. On Thursday, the 29th, May 29th, I sent the Qualtrics survey to all of you via emails to complete your NCs on there. We have a deadline of Monday, June 30th. So make sure to please start thinking about your NCs. If you need to reach out to our office to help you out, write those NCs, just let us know. Going with the timeline from July 1st to mid-July, the goal is for student affairs to review and assign those designations depending on everyone's vote, which will happen on June 24th. From mid-July to mid-August, the MSPE, the students will review their own MSPE. From mid-August to the end of August, we will check for accuracy of your grades and your evaluation. This is what we will call the appeal process. It will open and as well as close at that same month, the end of August. Last but not the least, September, we will have the MSPE finalized and ready to be sent out to residency programs. Is there anything you'd like to add, Dr. Lynn, on your end?
Yes, Darnell. I just wanted to add, as many of you who have already been meeting with me for our one-on-one sessions over the past several weeks, as you know, we've been working on your noteworthy characteristics for many of you already. Feel free to email them to me or Darnell before even the June 30th deadline so that we can go over them, give you feedback. You don't have to make another booking link appointment with me. For those of you who have already been working with me, I will email you feedback. I know your time is precious and you're busy studying for step two. So I will email you, offline to get you my feedback for your noteworthy characteristics. You don't have to make another appointment with me. Thank you, Darnell.
Thank you. All right, what is MSPE? The MSPE is the Medical Student Performance Evaluation, and this form will provide you a comprehensive summary of your academic performance. So what does your first 3 full years of medical school will look like? We'll have this form. It also reflects your evaluation as well as your grades in collaboration with your faculty and clinical educators that you work with that will showcase your academic progress as well as your professional attributes and your professionalism. What's in the MSPE? So we have the academic history, which will be from your M1 to M3 year, your noteworthy characteristics, your third year clerkship grades and evaluation, your designation paragraph, and a summary of your UCR S1 curriculum. This is not a letter of recommendation, by the way. Anything else you'd like to add on this page, Dr. Wynn?
Yeah, and I would say, and we can talk about this a little more towards the end of this conversation, but you all know my previous history of being on the program director side of things and Darnell's history of being previously a residency coordinator. Out of these elements, and I will tell you my personal opinion, and Darnell chime in too as well. I really think from a program director's point of view, the noteworthy characteristics is probably the most important. The other elements obviously are important too. They want to know your grades, especially in the specialty that you're applying to. They want to look at those evaluations. But noteworthy characteristics is important for a number of reasons. One, all the other elements are generated from pretty much you already know from the med school and from your faculty that have evaluated you. You already know what's going to be in there. But the noteworthy characteristics is really your opportunity to communicate to the programs specifically about you, right? This comes from you, the things that you're most proud of. And they're also points that I would use in the past when I would interview applicants. I would look at that and use that as talking points during my interview. So I would really say that's an extremely important component of it. And not to say that the other ones are not, but that in my opinion, I think that is very, very vital.
Thank you, Dr. Wynn. And speaking of the MSPE category for your designations, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, from distinguished to outstanding to excellent, very good, and good. Now, these designations may vary per institution, right? This does not necessarily explain who you are as an individual and what your grades are. It just reflects based on all of the other key aspects that the rubric that we will have for the MSPE category, which we will talk in a few more slides about it.
And I want to add on to what Darnell just mentioned. These designations of what she just said that are not standardized, that is an issue with the MSPE in general, in my opinion, because there is not a standardized designation system that is used by the AAMC. A lot of schools, they will have different terminology for this. Some of them will use a quartile name, like the top quartile, the second quartile, third. Like that is a little easier to understand. Some other schools will use terminology like this as well. But outstanding, for example, at our school is the second highest designation. But I will tell you, I've seen MSPEs before in the past from other places where outstanding is listed as basically the fifth ranking at other schools. So because of that, it's not consistent. It can be confusing to people who are reading it. And the only way you can truly tell this is you have to look at the way the school classifies the designation in the appendix section. And that's a lot of searching through a long document to look for that. But I just wanted to share that piece.
Thank you, Dr. Wayne. And as I was saying, there is a committee on how were those designations were determined, right? So we talked about your academic progress, which will consist of your STEP scores, some campus initiatives, your grades from your clerkship, from your MS3 clerkship, your awards, any extracurricular involvement that you may have, if you're in a student interest group, if you run a clinic, any other student leadership that you've participated in, this will go in this section, as well as any publications that you may have, research, Gold Humanism Honor Society, which we have here in UCR-SOM. This is where students do get inducted during their third year. Their leadership roles, as I already mentioned, as well as your clerkship narrative comments that will also go into your MSPE. And all of these will come into one. These form consists of all of this information.
I want to add into what Darnell just mentioned also on the previous slide is, we're fully aware of, and I would tell you on the program director side as well, when I would look at these, when you look at extracurricular activities versus research, someone who's done longitudinal research, let's say it's in 1 or 2 projects, but they've done it longitudinally across, let's say, 3 years, versus someone who has, let's say, 10 research projects or 10 extracurricular activities, but they're a few weeks or a few months each. I will tell you, I would personally value, it depends on who you ask, right? Is it quality over quantity? Personally, in my opinion, I think it is a balance of both, but I think the major part is, what did you personally get from these activities? How much did it actually enrich you? Not just your application, but enrich you and your experience in forming your ability to decide what specialties to go to and how you feel it would actually help you in that sense. And so, I know that debate is out there. However, depending on how your class decides to vote, it may or not be a consideration at all if we don't have these designations. But again, it's something that we are fully aware of, and I want you to know that we are aware of that, and the committee is looking at ways of addressing it to ascertain fairness, making sure that it is equitable if the vote comes to decide to keep the designations. We will try our best to make it a fair process through the committee. Thank you, Darnell.
Thank you. Just to reiterate about noteworthy characteristics, we know we had another presentation about this, so we're not really going to go in deep detail on what our NCs are. You're also welcome to visit our website. We have a slides about the presentation that we did in there that will provide you with more example of what noteworthy characteristic is. But just to reiterate and to explain or what the purpose of the NCs is, which will also go in your MSPE, and what Dr. Wynn had also alluded to a while ago was that he really did look at a lot of the noteworthy characteristics when reading MSPEs, is that this is your way to showcase your attributes as well as your achievement through your medical school. The format of this will be 180 to 200 words total for all of those 3 bullet points, which we can go over in a few slides per 1 to 2 sentences per bullet that you may have. Now it's gonna come together. As you can see on this picture right here, it looks like we have a little bit of example, but I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Wynn so he can discuss a little bit more about the MSPE in general for you.
Thank you, Darnell. So, as Darnell mentioned, as this sample MSP, as you can see here, what's on the first page. The first page is that noteworthy characteristic. That is what I see as on the program director side of things. That's the first thing I look at. So I often will look at that to use that as talking points during the interview. And you can see here, the next part is the academic history. Are there any concerns, whether there's leave of absences or any gaps in training? That's typically listed there. Those are the facts, right? And then if you go down a little further, then it talks about the structure of what the medical school curriculum looks like. And then you can see here, there's a section that will go over the different evaluations that you have received during your clinical rotations during your 3rd year. And they're demarcated by whether you got pass, high pass, or honors. And then finally, Darnell, if you can scroll down a little further, because this is going to be a lot of repetition here for all the different rotations. You can see here on that summary page, sorry, if you can scroll down right there, just right under that summary, it just basically lists here how many honors, how many high pass did you get, and then the final line is what that designation would look at. Now, depending upon how your class decides to vote, it would be basically eliminating this last sentence. But I will tell you, in my experience of being on the other side of things, on the program director's side, again, my 2 cents on the MSPE is the following, right? There are concerns about its objectivity because, again, there's small things like we were mentioning, right? Like, how do you look at, the quality versus quantity for extracurriculars versus research and how that's calculated in terms of the designations? Every single school does things differently. And then on top of it, every school does things differently in terms of how they're going to give out those designations and how they're going to actually even label those designations. It would be one thing if you just labeled the designations, okay, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. That's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. But when you use words that mean different things at different schools, it can be difficult for a program director when they're going through thousands of applications to really ascertain, right? Darnell, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So in terms of its importance in the MSPE, of the MSPE and residency applications, it's not to say that they're not important. There are many important components of the of your application and overall, though, right? Including your board scores, your letters of rec, your SLOEs, and the MSPE, the personal statement. All of those are equally important. And you can see here, the holistic review approach encompasses all of that in terms of deciding who to interview. It's not just one element, the MSPE. And it emphasizes that a comprehensive review of various aspects is very important. Another component of that is improving the MSPE quality. The quality of the MSPEs may be improved by using a common language of skill attainment, such as the AAMC's entrustable professional activities, and using that document to discuss students' other attributes and contributions. So there's a lot of different things. And all of these are taken verbatim from articles from NIH And there's a lot of studies on the role of MSPE in the application process. Darnell, if you can go to the next slide. And again, these next two comments right here, these are actually from articles that I just referred to, that I talked about in terms of, you know, that look at the efficacy of MSPEs and how program directors view them. And these are challenges that are identified by program directors. You can see here, the major one is lack of standardization, which I mentioned earlier. A study examining MSPs from 141 US med schools, members of the AAMC, found that only 12 schools included complete comparative information in the summary section in accordance with the guidelines from the AAMC. Other schools were in partial compliance or did not comply at all. This highlights a significant issue with consistency and comparability of information. 12% included that comparative information in the summary section. And then concerns from the PDs. PDs place a high value of MSPE, but find it limited by concerns over its validity, objectivity, and lack of standardization. This indicates that while PDs recognize the importance of the MSPE, they also have reservations about its reliability and fairness. And I will tell you, speaking as a formerly in that role, that is exactly true. I mean, I will tell you, I've seen so many where a designation is, as I shared with you earlier, someone is outstanding at one school, which here at UCR School of Medicine is the second highest tier, but that's the lowest ranking at another school. So if I don't have time and I'm busy going through a massive amount of applications and I don't look carefully at the appendix to look at how that school even assigns it and what that ranking actually means, I'm going to think outstanding may mean something different for one of those applicants. And unfortunately, that would be unfair to one of those applicants, right? And so, like I said, when I look at these, I take the MSPE with literally a huge grain of salt. So, now if you can go to the next slide, as we talk about our conclusion, you know, and if you can go to the next slide too, Darnell, as we talk about our conclusion, the MSPE does matter, but really what really matters is you, right? I think, I will share with you in my experience of having been in those shoes for many years as I was interviewing numerous applicants. And as many of you know, I worked, um, I'm a family doc, but our residents, when I was at UCI, rotated through every single specialty. They rotated through internal medicine, they rotated through gen surg, through peds, OB-GYN. They rotated through surgical subspecialties, including urology, through ENT and ophtho, and I worked very closely with those program directors. I knew them very well, and I still keep in contact with them, and many of them are still my friends. And I will share with you their grain of salt on the MSPEs too. Yes, it is an important document. There's no way of saying that it's not. It is important. There are things that it's useful for to look at the rotation comments, especially if that's the specialty you're applying to. If you're applying to IM, obviously they're going to look at your evaluations for IM and see how you performed on that rotation. They're going to look at your noteworthy characteristics. Those are things they're going to focus on. But the major part of it, and I will tell you this, as I've interviewed, thousands of applicants over the years who've applied to UCI when I was there, in that situation of going through applicants, and when I rank them, the MSPE, yeah, it is a part of it, but I've ranked applicants, whether someone scores, let's say, a 250 or 245, am I going to rank the person who scored a 250 higher than the person who had a 245? Especially if the person who had a 245, I know them, they did a Vislo away rotation with me, they did really well in their rotation. It's all about fit, right? In the sense that, programs are looking for residents who they feel will be a good fit in their program. It's not just about board scores. It's not just about your MSP. It's about what you bring to the table in terms of your character, your professionalism, those things that are quote unquote untangibles, right? These are things they want to know, is this someone they can count on? Is this someone they can work with, right? And a lot goes to say when you're doing these rotations, that's why it's so important. It's for them to see, can they work with you, right? That fit and the culture that these residency programs have established, that's their opportunity to see that from you. And on the flip side, it's for you to see, do you want to be a part of that culture, right? Is this a place you actually want to spend the next few years of your life, 4 or 5 years of your training to be there? It goes both ways. So, this take home point here, again, while it's important, there's a whole holistic process that goes behind it that I think is really important to emphasize. This is just one piece of the whole puzzle. And you yourself, when you come there, you will show them why they need you and why they want you, right? And I think that will go a long way. If you go there, you have a positive attitude, you show you're ready to work hard, take ownership of your patients, do very well on your rotations, function at the level of someone that they know they can depend on and trust. I think that goes a long way. Darnell, can you go to the next slide, please? And
I think this was the slide.
oh, that was the next slide. So
Yes.
um, so again, like I said, the MSP is just one piece of it. Again, there are many components to this picture, and that's from a program director's point of view, right? And Darnell, you have had experience as a former residency coordinator. I know you've looked at thousands of applications over the years yourself, and you probably have looked at a lot of MSPEs, right? What are your thoughts?
Also gonna it's also not just the MSPE, but just the way you interview and the way you present yourself, right? Because especially with the specialty that I actually was in, which is the anesthesiology, you only had 10 minutes to make a difference, right? So they don't have enough time. Program directors don't have enough time to flip through your entire MSPE and figure out what type of legend and outstanding, which rank of the outstanding level of the designation falls into, because there is no a legend, because it's not universal to all the institutions. So I just wanted to kind of share a little bit about the interview process and make friends with your program coordinators. If you have any informations or questions about how to get in touch with the program director, sometimes they just get so busy and busy interviewing the students. But the first important thing mainly is the first thing that comes with being a doctor is ensuring that clinical their patient is what matters the most, and how you're going to take care of your patients when you're out there in the real world.
Thank you for sharing that, Darnell. And in closing, Darnell and I just want to share with you, so that and I've shared this with many of you already. I know the process of applying to residency is stressful. Darnell and I both understand that, but we are here to help you and to support you every single step of the way. If you need anything, reach out to us. We look forward to meeting with you all on June 24th. We support your decision, your class's decision on whatever you guys decide to vote. Whatever you all decide to vote, we are here to support you in that process, and we're going to get through this together, right? We're going to be here to support you as you apply to residency and celebrate with you. Um, hopefully in next year. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams.